I mean, the minute we're born, what's the first thing we do? We inspire. And in that moment, we're taking on life because what we're breathing in is the atmosphere of the day, and it contains the life-giving oxygen, everything that we need, but it also contains that mysterious substance that Mother Earth has created for us called spirit. So we inspire, we're inspired. And the next and the next act is expire. We give out. So there's our first ever effort of giving and receiving.
Hello, and welcome to the Mystics Rising podcast. I'm Jen Riley, and I'm so delighted to share with you Michelle MacEwen. Michelle is a shaman, a spiritual guide, and the cultivator of wild wisdom. It is her own spiritual practice that she has developed, kind of weaving together her experiences with working with Native Americans, with her own ancestral backgrounds, both in Celtic shamanism and the Nordic traditions. And I just love, first of all, I love Michelle's voice. I have to say that. It's so beautiful to be guided from her. And she does these really beautiful shamanic journeys. And it's been a very special place to cultivate this really deep connection. I mean, we talk about this a lot on the show. There's so many modalities, and that's why we're here. And that's why we're doing this, right? There's so many modalities to building intimacy, authenticity, and getting to know our true essence. And I mean, that is the path of the mystic. And Michelle has really cultivated a beautiful practice that she is putting together her life's work into a book called The Wild Wisdom Exordium. And on today's show, we're going to talk a little bit about how she kind of cultivated this practice, a lot of it just from her own experience and imagination in the world, and also from her traditional belief systems. And I just want to, welcome all of you into the world of shamanic journeys. So today we talk about the shamanic journey, connecting to nature, connecting to ourself. And I just want to welcome you all to experience a little bit of Michelle. She does offer a monthly shamanic journey practice on her website. So I'll link all that in the show notes. And you can find a discount, of course. And I will, without further ado, share with you the wonderful Michelle. Wow, welcome, Michelle. I'm so delighted to have you today. And I guess I want to jump right into to you and into wild wisdom. I think that's one of my favorite topics. And I know that you're working on a book about wild wisdom, and that's been, I believe, one of the foundations of your practice. And I would love for you to share a little bit about where did wild wisdom come from, and what does it mean, and what's unfolding.
Well, thank you, Jen. It's so great to be here and have the opportunity to have this chat with you about wild wisdom. I can't really remember where did wild wisdom begin? Where does it begin and end? For me, it's the expression of my spiritual practice, my spiritual pathway. It's something that very early on, working with people, a name that just came into me that felt really good. Like, yes, this is what this work's about. It's about tapping into our inner resources, and while simultaneously being really aware of being part of all the life around us. And I've always been passionate about the wild, about wild places, wild animals, and something that I was aware of as a child, even though I may not have been able to express it in such a way, was the importance of being out in nature and realizing that we are part of nature, not separate, and that within us all are waters that run really deep, spiritual technologies that are available to us to tap into, to cultivate, to develop and express in the world. As I grew up, as you know, I come from a lineage of natural healers in the Gaelic tradition, the Irish and Scots traditions, and something that I've always been drawn to is finding my own answers. And I think I innately understood that, within us all are the answers. Like within us all is a teacher and a healer and so on, that all the things that we often in the modern day look for outside of ourselves are within us. And we need to really develop those relationships if we're going to then make the most of, what's out there. I can remember a mentor of mine long ago. I can remember hearing her say, "Who has ever heard of a bachelor of shamanism?" So, that's kind of been a thing for me. And I've always been a teacher. I've always been passionate about, sharing with people and telling stories. So kind of the way it unfolded and evolved was just really natural, so natural that I can't even remember the first time I used the expression wild wisdom. But whenever that was, it stayed, and it's been part of my life. It just seems like such a natural part of us. I think we're all hardwired for the wild. We've had many, many, many more generations as wild beings than we have as, inverted commas, civilized, living the way that we do now. And the way that we're going now, it's been a rapid journey of dissociating from the rest of nature for many, many people.
Yeah, the dissociation with nature it's like a tender and sad place, and interesting that is where we are today. And yeah, I'm curious how did this how did your connection with nature kind of inform this this intimacy with your inner self?
That's a great question, Jen, and it's probably got many answers. But, if I'm thinking back to, originally, one of the pivotal experiences in my young life was moving to Australia in 1963. And back then, that was an incredible journey. And for someone like me, one of my, one of my assets is my vivid imagination, which, as a child, I was always told you've got such a vivid imagination, as though it was a really bad thing. And I had to really stand strong in my spirit, because I always knew that my imagination was a wonderful thing. So the journey as a little person on a ship that lasted for 3.5 weeks and included sailing through the Suez Canal, because it was right before the time where that was shut down and blocked off. So coming, from sailing from the UK to Naples in Italy, and we'd get out and walk around these incredible places. I still remember that so vividly, that whole journey, and the Suez Canal, and stopping at Yemen and Sri Lanka and places like that, and having these incredible moments, if that didn't really activate my imagination and my connection, therefore, to my inner world, because the imagination is, that the great interface between the seen and the unseen, the inner and outer world, this world and the other world. So it's just been very natural for me to have that deep and an enduring connection. It's just something that's naturally evolved.
Yeah, and it's like this. It's funny you mentioned like this younger you in the childlike mind, and how most children have this level of imagination and sensitivity, and there's, I feel like, a piece of like the mini, like I sometimes refer to my daughter as the mini mystic, and how
Yes.
there are these, how children have this almost natural shamanistic mystical side of them, and actually probably a deeper understanding of this inner outer world and this imagination, almost like the veil is thinner in
Yeah,
those years.
exactly. I mean, one of the other, well, it was a series of books when I was a child, it was called Mary Poppins. And of course, Mary Poppins knew that when we're born, that we're still in touch with the other world and that we can speak to the animals, And when I read that story when I was really small, I was like, when I grow up, I'm going to speak to the wild animals, when I'm older, I'm going to go and live out with the wild animals. That was a really strong calling for me. And of course, I do work with wildlife. I rescue and rehabilitate injured and orphaned wildlife. And I remembered that the first wallaby that we raised, when we took her out to the wild and watched her, it was, that all came rushing back to me. In fact, when I said goodbye to her and we looked each other in the eye, I remembered that moment in my younger life where I made that declaration that when I grow up, and there I was doing it. But it's true that when we're born, we're really connected to the mystery that we've come from. And I think, of course, when we're babies and we don't speak human language yet, that we're still connected to the language of the other world in a visceral way. And then as we become old and we're getting close to that doorway again, I think, as we get closer and closer to the other world again. And as we go through life, that the more that we express our creative pathway, our spiritual pathway, the more we can be in touch, but not as much as when we're very young and very old.
I know you've done a lot of shamanic journeys with all ages, but I know you said you've done some with kids as well. And I think I want to recall there's like a nighttime ritual or something that you've done.
Yes. I developed it for my daughters, and then I co-parented some of my grandchildren, and they spent a lot of time with us out here. And it came to life again. It's called Star Above the Head. I've recorded some of them actually. I think one of them might be up in my membership in the Journey Gallery, but I am planning on releasing little albums of guided journeys. And I will definitely do a series of Star Above the Head. There's something so magical, and my older grandchildren who are in their mid and late teens now still say to me, "Oh, Nan, Star Above the Head." And they had quite a lot of anxiety, the two eldest ones. And, normally kids, they don't want to go to bed. They want to stay up and keep doing things. And I would have these two beautiful children running down the corridor calling out, "Nan, Nan, it's Star Above the Head time." And we'd always begin with, see the star above your head, see what color it is today, feel that color. So to really bring it in from the unseen into their physical being. And before you knew it, you could hear them just the breathing, really calming. And I never knew where we were going to go in the journey on that particular night, but it was always connected to the landscape where we live and the sounds of nature around us. Was it a windy night? Was it pouring with rain? Could you hear the frogs? Because there's hundreds upon hundreds of frogs here. And when they start chorusing, you can hear it going in layers down into the valley. And so I would always draw on what's around me, which is truly, really shamanistic to work like that, with the energy of the day. And I always think that that's what made it so powerful for them. And by the time I'd finished whatever the story that we were going into to do with the spirit of the nature around us, they'd be asleep. But of course, they'd still be able to hear my voice as they were sleeping. And I'd finish the journey, and that would be that. They'd be asleep until morning. We had to wake them up, to get ready for the day ahead and get them to the school bus, which was up in the forest. And everything was an adventure. And I think that was really important to me, to create that atmosphere and environment for them, because I think that nature can teach us everything we need to know. The rest of nature, we are nature, not separate. And when we remember that, it's easier for us to behold the nature around us and see the beauty that's all around us, and draw that into our own living story. And it's very reassuring for children. I think for a lot of the generations now, many people in the modern cultures have been completely disconnected. They see nature as something that they should go out and get a connection to. And just that thought in itself shows how alienated they are. So, of course, people suffer a lot of anxiety and depression because they don't feel part of the rest of life.
Yeah, I think too, like between connecting to nature and even just making that space and that time, I think is so important for kids. But at any stage in our life, it's like kind of what I'm hearing is like creating space and time to listen, to listen. And there's so much information available in that inner space and in that inner world, that we're not making that time and slowing down to listen to it.
Yeah, exactly. And you said two really key things: time and space. And last year, one of my monthly practices that I send out was about spaciousness. And we did that as a monthly practice, as a whole month's practice. And I found myself referring to it constantly in our membership calls, and when I'm working with people. I think spaciousness is absolutely critical to us right now, because that's something that we don't take. And when you say, space, it's, yes, taking time, but it's also like creating a feeling of not being crammed in with all kinds of things that aren't really relevant or important to to the things in life that we need to pay attention to. We need space. We need to feel as though we can breathe. Spaciousness is imperative to our spiritual immune system, which in turn impacts our physical immune system. And the other thing, time, time is the gift that we get from Mother Earth. She's the one that gives us time. And how we choose to spend that time is up to us. But we get that time in the cycles of life, the cycles of the seasons, and when time is up, that's it, So we need to honor and revere time and all of those things, go outside, look up at the sky, put your arms around a tree, listen to the birds sing, put your feet in the water, whatever it is, take the time to be out there and receive and have the thankfulness. And that's, giving back. See the beauty that is all around you. And the moment that you start to do that and be in appreciation of that and gratitude for that, you create space. And you can really start to see the beauty that's in you, because that's a huge thing for all of us.
I'm being reminded of, I know something that you talk often about are moments of reverence.
Yes.
What other practices do you recommend for people in this disconnected world to connect, or what practices have been the most connecting for you?
What reminds us of our wholeness, I think, is what you mean. And I think the simple ones, because if you make it complicated, especially for people who aren't used to having a practice, they don't do it. It's like, tomorrow. And so as you know, I put out a monthly practice for my list. It's just something that I do, not a newsletter, but a practice. And I put a lot of thought into it. It's actually one of my practices, is to develop a practice for the month that I feel is really capturing the energy of this month ahead. What's coming in, what do I feel people would benefit from, and then I offer a little bit of information about that, a little story around it, and a simple practice. And I think that the more that we cultivate simple practices, we start to get our own ideas, and our own practices and rituals, of course, are the most potent. But a really good beginning practice is to have a little ritual, and a ritual means repeating something often. So a good rule of thumb is to choose the same time of day. So choose the time of day that is easy for you, when you know you're least likely to be caught up, or you make the time. Like, my practice isn't about the clock time, it's about the light time. And I go outside, I'm drawn inextricably by the light. There's a certain time of late light, going toward the evening, and I flow outside with it. I'm just drawn toward the setting sun, to the west, which for me is the ocean, the cliff tops here beside me in the ocean. And take that moment, that special time of day for you. It might be first thing in the morning, it might be the middle of the day, it doesn't matter. What resonates with you is where the power is. And go outside. And it's like a walking meditation or a walking journey, where you just focus on the elements around you. I don't care if it's pouring with rain or blasting a gale, or it's a beautiful golden, sunset. To go out and just feel part of it all is incredible. It's really opens you. So you're just paying attention to the sounds and the sights, the light, and engage with all of your senses, just like we do when we do an inner journey or a shamanic journey to go within into our inner nature. We do exactly the same thing. So paying attention via all of your senses, because your senses, like your emotions, are really informing 100% of you. And then your practice evolves into becoming at one with it all. So you start to merge with the life all around you, and then you become more attuned to the spirit of everything around you, the spirit of those trees, and that tree over there in particular, or whatever's happening. And I think that is one of the most simple and basic practices I give everybody, and it's the one that you can take with you through the whole of your life and make it your own and experience it in whatever way is right for you at the time.
I love that. What came alive in me when you're sharing is and I say this often, I think on the show, is like awareness almost is like a muscle memory. Like the more we, practice the muscle memory, like the more easily, readily available it comes online without thinking. And so the more we can practice sensing into all the different senses as we're in our waking life, we can bring that same attunement, listening, receptivity into our inner world. And so, yeah, I'm just appreciating this, as external is internal, above and below, and all that is all culminating as one. Now, I'm curious, maybe for some of the listeners, if you could describe like what is a shamanic journey for you, and maybe you could talk a little bit more about that experience.
Yeah, I'd love to. I think, there's many different teachings around the shamanic journey, and the way that I teach it is a way that evolved over working in many different places, with people from all walks of life, and trying to make it really accessible, because that's really important to me. So for me, like any good spiritual practice, it begins with being present and the breath. And of course, the breath is the magical tool. I mean, it's not just a tool, but when we pay attention to it and we specifically breathe in a certain way, then it's the asset that enables us to go where we want to go. But let's just think about breath for a moment. I mean, the minute we're born, what's the first thing we do? We inspire. And in that moment, we're taking on life, because what we're breathing in is the atmosphere of the day, and it contains the life-giving oxygen, everything that we need, but it also contains that mysterious substance that Mother Earth has created for us called spirit. So we inspire, we're inspired. And the next act is expire. We give out. So there's our first ever effort of giving and receiving. And so if you think about that, then you realize the breath is, wow, it's a lot more than just, we fill our lungs and, we stay alive. It's everything on that level. It's potent and beautiful. And then, we've taken our first breath, and what also comes in is the love of those around us, parents, community, everyone who's been waiting for our arrival. And so when we start to work with the breath to prepare ourselves for a journey, for meditation, for any sort of spiritual practice, it recalls that first moment, that first incredible, holy moment where we truly are, we're coming into the world and we're ourselves, we're complete. And we have to keep remembering that. And that's part of spiritual practice. So the journey is a way of accessing our inner world. And I, over the years, have really developed it through the heart center, which is what some people would call the spiritual heart, the center of our chest, as it were, or the heart chakra in certain traditions. Because I just innately understood, and also through the stories and teachings I received growing up in my family, that, you know, it's all about the heart center. That's where the soul is connected to and experiences life through the spiritual heart. And, you know, one of the things I always say is listen to the voice of the heart. It will never lead you astray, you know, like not the voice of the mind, the voice of the heart, because the heart and soul are in charge, right? And so when we go within to the heart center, and there are the doorways to all other places, and there all the forces available to us gather and can be called forth. And I just found over the years and years of teaching this practice, everyone can get in there because it is the natural or a natural way. And so we work with the breath and our focus, our awareness and our intention, and we go within. And from there, we can follow the heart's pathway and have a lot of self-discovery, a lot of experiences. We can find answers to our own questions. We can receive guidance, magical signs. I'm all about following the magical signs. We can receive respite. We have visionary experiences, because in there, we're in our spirit realm and communicating with our soul. So it's in some ways like conscious dreaming, you know, where we're not fettered by the physical body. Although when we're journeying, we might have a degree of awareness of our physical body, especially if we're not super practiced in it, but you can really go anywhere. And imagination is a really important part of that, you know, of the inner journey. So it's a wonderful practice. It enables us to really access in a very deep and profound way all our inner resources.
I've had a lot of really profound experiences in your journeys, and I think one of my favorite parts is just really seeing and being with my inner nature, and realizing that there is this inner, like the depth of my inner world is so much more vast than I had foreseen. And it's always changing, and there's so much to notice and to take in, and to also be held and guided in that space has been really helpful.
It's really important, because when you go within and you actually see yourself in this beautiful place in nature, and then you realize that's your nature, your wild. And when an ecosystem is intact, it self-regulates. So, you know, when we can go in and go, oh, this beautiful place, oh, it's me. This is actually, you know, the essence of who I am. This is my spirit. This is my, you know, what my soul has manifested for me to experience this life through. And then we have this physical body, this incredible soul shrine, and that interfaces and interconnects with the nature all around, you know, all around, that we're part of a greater ecosystem. And within that, we're part of the self-regulation of that, you know, bigger ecosystem. And then you start to really understand those old mystical teachings that I learned as a really small child, you know, when I was really small. One of the big things that my mother always said to me, as within, so without, as above, so below. And that was like a mantra that I grew up with.
Yeah, I love that. How did you develop the shamanic journey practice?
Oh, the shamanic journey practice itself. Well, you see, that was something that I was naturally doing without realizing it had a name. I didn't even, you know, like realize what I did was shamanistic, because we, you know, that's not a word in our language anyway, right? So in my culture, We didn't have names like that. And a lot of our names or ways of explaining had disappeared. And because we did know our story, you know, and I grew up with the stories about my great aunt and my great great aunt, and that, you know, they did this and they did that, and, you know, they always saw the spirits. And when my mother was a child and she was always talking, what appeared to be talking to herself, and her mother would say, because my great great aunt Ginny brought my grandfather up, and, you know, she came down from the Highlands of Scotland when he was orphaned, and so she was part of our life and part of the family life. And she would say, oh, she's not talking to herself, she's talking to the spirits. So, you know, like they were just, that was just the way it was at home. Like, of course, you're talking to the spirits. I was always talking to the spirits when I was a child. And, you know, one of my big fears was because we'd been silenced. And I worked this out when I was older. But one of my big fears was speaking out in front of people. Mm. It was really scary, even when I was a teacher and I was the head of the English department in a really big school and had to run meetings. Even then, when things were really important, it was really hard. But I was always could go within and have that inner dialogue. So, and my imagination would take flight, and I'd be going within and talking to the spirits. And, you know, so the inner journey was just something that I naturally did. And it was always an adventure. And so when I started working with people really with that awareness, I wanted to show them to go within where they could find themselves and they could understand themselves and they could meet their spirit guides, their ancestors who had so much to share with them, right? So it was something that I always did and that I developed, and I suddenly found myself doing with other people. Even when I was teaching, I would do it with students in a way, you know, like just like a meditative kind of way, but to get them to really, it was actually, I guess, motivated by wanting to help people, especially teenagers, to listen to the voice of their heart. Mm. So to get really focused on that, to how do we get the mind out of the way? And it's the same in meditation, you know, so nice deep breathing, take yourself within, you know, like locate yourself deep within in your heart, and then listen and ask questions and listen to the answers. And it just went on from there, because my imagination is boundless. And it's, I'd say, the same for all of us, really, if we just get unfettered. And so I just developed it. And the more I worked with people in this way, and in the early years of doing these practices with people, a lot of people came who'd had a lot of trauma in their life. And, you know, the first thing was to receive their story so they knew it had been heard. And that's a huge release and a huge healing right there. And then to help them to be able to go within and see their beauty and realize that this is who they are, and hear the beautiful voice of the heart, which is never cruel or critical. That's the mind. And, you know, it's about telling the mind, be quiet, there'll be consequences, you know. And when you realize you can, you know, that you're in charge of the mind, you're not your mind, it's just part of you in this life, and it's a wonderful thing, but it's not who you are. All of those things played into developing the journey. And I was saying earlier about it, that I created, you know, the way that I created my way of journeying was going in through the heart center. And so a lot of it was just finding my way into making this an accessible practice for anybody. so that they could have that incredible experience of their inner world and the riches. And I mean, even the practice of going out into nature for 5 minutes at a certain time of day that resonates with you, when you do that, you start to behold the beauty. Oh, look at that little bird. Look at that ray of light. Look at that sunset. Look at the light on the water, whatever it is. It's inevitable. When you step out at a time of day you resonate with, you'll resonate with what's going on out there. And that's reverence. In that moment, you're having that wonder and awe. There's the reverence. There's the connecting, the seeing the beauty. And in that moment, the treasure chest that's contained in your heart center flies open and it's accessible to you. And that's why it's a major practice for me, but it's the outer version of the inner journey, and we want to get the same result when we go within. So we've got these incredible ways, and when you do those simple practices, they interface and you realize that there's this incredible interweaving, and that's what I call life is a journey, or living life as a journey. That's the journey for me, is the interweaving of the inner and the outer world.
There's so much in that I love so much. And especially this part of how it touches on trauma and like just creating the space for it. And it is there, like trauma, it gets like almost imprinted in the memories, right? In like kind of in our brain, and aren't a part of our true nature, like aren't a part of the true self. And so there are often so many gifts from being able to work through that trauma. And there's so many modalities of that. And I know you've often done soul retrieval. I don't know if that's something that maybe you want to share what that practice is like, and what that pulls in.
Yeah, that's one of my probably deepest practices, and I've evolved that really differently now, so that, you know, oftentimes it's not really apparent that that's what we're doing, so it's not a traumatic thing for the person, because it's true, trauma is memory, you know, like trauma is held in our memories. And so you know that the trauma is still activated when people are remembering it, and it's coming up and it's getting triggered. And it, you know, it can be really difficult because people don't have spiritual practices per se. And that's often why they come to me. They don't know that's what they need, that they need to evolve their spiritual practice, but that's the medicine and the journey. But so that's why I mentioned before, having your story heard and received is paramount. You know, I've heard people say, oh, don't let people tell the story of their trauma because it re-traumatizes them. But I don't believe that for an instant. People need to tell somebody who's equipped to be able to hear what happened to them. Because when it's been received, there's a release. When you know you've been heard and really received, you know, that is an incredible healing moment. Now, my work in my practice too, when I did a lot of trauma work, I would receive the story, but then I wouldn't hold on to it. It would pass through me, and I would know, you know, where I'm sending it. And have rituals that I'd be doing just within as I'm receiving the story. So I know that where it's going on to is safe and will be managed or handled. And that energy is then free, and the person is freed up. And it's not that what's happened to us ever goes away. How can it? It's part of our lived experience. It's part of, you know, helping us become who we're becoming. But the key thing is with soul retrieval is that the part of you that's been lost or hidden or flown away is brought back. So we again can remember our wholeness, because that we're still whole, even though we've had a trauma, and we call it soul loss. But no matter what, we're still whole. It's just that this part of us isn't accessible because it's retreated to somewhere safer. And I'll explain the principle about that in a moment. But But just to finish off with the part about the story is that a lot of people can't remember what happened to them. They have a lot of memory loss. That's a typical symptom of soul loss. So when they tell their story and it's received, what happens is the story can take its rightful place in the past. We don't have to keep remembering it. It's there, it's part of our story, but it's behind us, and we don't keep bringing it forward into the now and recreating it in the now. And eventually, as we get that beautiful space that comes with time, it becomes like a myth. Like it's happened. But, I'm a multiple trauma survivor as a child and as an adult. And those traumas now, like they happened in a past life. I can call them up, especially if I'm feeling depressed. I can dive into them, but I don't allow myself. I go, stop and take a deep breath and yes, that's part of my story, but it's not who I am now. But it helped me to become who I'm becoming. And I give thanks for that. And that's really important. And it puts it back into perspective, and I'm in charge. And I'm who I am now, not who I was when it was happening. So it's in the past. And that's when it becomes our wisdom. It's not our wisdom until it's in its rightful place. So this is what happens after soul retrieval. So soul retrieval is...
because it's not, that part of us isn't always accessible to, because trauma can certainly take over us.
Yeah, that's right. In big floods, like grief. It's like grief, that it comes in big waves and something will trigger it. And so when you've been through soul retrieval, it really helps you to realize and have the awareness that it's not happening now, it's in the past. And the integration is really the most important part of soul retrieval, which is getting that perspective and awareness of it's part of your story. It's helped you to become who you're becoming, and I release you with love and gratitude, right? And so what is soul loss? Soul loss is an incredible survival mechanism. So when we experience something traumatic, part of our vital essence can separate so that the rest of us keeps going. And that's what holds that traumatic experience. And in traditional cultures, that energy would be, receive healing and be helped to reintegrate very quickly. These days, it can be a whole lifetime, that it doesn't get sorted out, or lifetimes if you believe in lifetimes. And so part of my role, and I used to work in a fairly traditional way, was to do a journey on behalf of the person who was seeking the cure. And I would identify where that part of their vital essence or their spirit was, where it was hiding in their energy field, where it had gone out into their spirit world. Was it with an ancestor? Was it in hiding over there behind that spirit of that rock? Or where did that part fly off to? And convince it to come back home and integrate into the whole. Joseph Campbell, the great mythologist, had a great way of describing it, the monster outside. And I remember hearing him in an interview with Bill Moyers, who said to him, well, the monster, Joseph, the monster, that's a scary thing. What do we do? And Joseph talks about, well, you've got to embrace the monster. And, because that's the same idea. When you can embrace what you perceive to be the monster, it's like it's the part of you that hasn't been acceptable that acts out because it's wounded and it's in pain and it's, crying out for love. And once it's embraced, it comes back into the whole, and it's no longer the monster. It becomes part of your vital essence or your creativity, and it's once more accessible as pure creative energy. And so when we restore that part of us that splits away in trauma, it becomes pure creative essence again that's available to us because it's part of the whole. So
I'm just always blown away by how many different modalities, traditional cultures are all kind of saying similar things and working with trauma in a very similar way. And it's this shamanic practice that has been around forever, that has been really touching on and healing communities. And I'm just really touched by how the answers have always been here, and yet we're still inventing and coming into, let's say, like,
I know we
modern
complicate everything. The word shaman is from the Tungus people in Siberia. It's their word for their medicine person or their wise person, their healer, seer, keeper of the mysteries. In my tradition, one word is Koliok, and it's pronounced differently depending on where you come from. And the nickname would be, in some areas, the Karlan, the Mother Earth personified. And then, of course, the tradition that sprang up around that was the wise person or the wise woman, the wise woman tradition, the one that would be sought out to find the answers and the mysteries. And, like I've explored many different traditions I've been invited in. I've traveled around the world for decades with my work and inevitably met incredible healers of different traditions and been invited in. And back when you can peel it all back, it's, you can use that word shaman, and that word came out into the world because when anthropologists came into that part of Russia or Siberia, there were people still practicing their ancient traditions, and they were called shamans. So that word got brought out and popularized, and that's why we all use it now, even though a lot of people shudder and say, don't call yourself a shaman, don't use that word. I surrendered to it a long time ago because, especially working a lot in America and Europe, everybody kept referring to me as a shaman, whether I liked it or not. And I'm just like, you know what? Whatever, if it conveys the message and people get the idea of this is what she does, because it's explaining the unexplainable, like, what do you do? Well, how long do you have? And I'll sit down and tell you, it's, if you want to use that word, then you would say that all traditional cultures were originally shamanistic. That's the original spiritual pathway. And it's about that we are of the earth and we are of the stars. And, we're expressions of that. And, it's connecting in, and all pathways lead to the same place. Some take longer than others. And, for us in the West these days, it's about our, sadly, about our traumas and our hard experiences and our search for who am I, like all these questions, who am I? Well, how important is that? I think we should be asking ourselves, what can we be? Rather than what should I do, or who am I? What can I be? How can I be? And if I can be true to what I've come here to express, then that's the biggest difference, because then I'll be the ripple in the pond. And I can remember doing a northern tradition, in the northern tradition, a shamanic ritual called the Side ritual in Denmark. I think it's SEIDR. There's various spellings of it, but it's the, one of the Nordic shamanic traditions. And we did a Side ritual, and the community chants and the shaman, or in their language, the vulva, goes out on the journey, and then a member of the community asks the questions whilst you're in the journey or the altered state of consciousness. And one of the questions was, and we're talking, this is back in probably 2000, and I don't know, it was maybe 2004. And I remember being asked, actually it was in Georgia in America, but I used to do these same ceremonies in Denmark, which is where they originated. And the question was, what can we do? And the answer was really simple and clear: be the ripple in the pond, which means be you and radiate out. Just allow that your energy from what you give out from your heart to radiate out, and it will affect change. Imagine if we were all doing that, the change that would be universal and all different. And that's it. We're all currents of the ocean of life. And if we're all being true and expressing our hearts, it'd be different. And it wouldn't be easy, because there's no easy. So people who think we're going to go into peace, love and dove, I don't think so. But there's easier ways for us to accept differences and resolve conflicts. And I think that's what we're moving toward. That's how we can be in the world.
Yeah, it's like all the constructs of the mind become barriers to receiving the love. And so when you drop into the heart, when you can dissolve and step away from the constructs of the mind, you can be more permeable to the love that is all around.
That's right. And it comes from within you, but sometimes the experience of it outside of you coming into you awakens something, and that's why our experiences are so vital, and the hard ones that we would never choose, the awful ones, the unspeakable things, are sometimes, within those very hard wrappings are the greatest gifts. And that's when we can transmute wounds into wisdom.
That transmute wounds into wisdom.
And excuse me, I think that that's part of our journey, and to see our life as an ever unfolding story, an adventure of the soul, which is why I chose with my live work, which I love. I think it's there's something about being with people and taking them on the journey, the outer journey and the inner journey at the same time, having that rich, direct experience in nature. So what I call the pilgrimages, both here where I live beside the Southern Ocean on the second most southerly point of mainland Australia, or when I'm in the land of my ancestors in the west of Ireland overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, that kind of rich experience of inner and outer world simultaneously. There's something about it, and we are having adventures, and it's incredible. And people realise how amazing life is and how beautiful life is. And when you get that, even if you just get it for a moment, it changes everything.
I'm so glad you mentioned your pilgrimages, because I know that's been such a part of the practice that you help cultivate with others. And I guess I'm curious what practices you're working on with others in the moment. I know you touched on some of these practices that you send out, but maybe you could speak a little bit about, how are you working with people today?
I love that question. I do have a membership on my website, and the membership includes a monthly call. And during that monthly call, which is a 90-minute call, we practice the inner journey. So I have a monthly practice I send out every new moon, which goes to everybody on my list, members and just people that have signed up to be on my mailing list. And then we use that practice to take a deeper dive in our membership call. So the membership involves or includes a journey gallery where members can access lots of recordings of guided journeys, including instructional ones to how to begin, how to learn the inner journey. There's a series where I take you through the very basics, and then there's all kinds of other, journey to meet your saboteur, journey to find an answer to a question. There's all, journey for integration. There's a library of recorded guided inner journeys that I've created especially for the membership, as well as the monthly call where we discuss our monthly practice. We have discussion around it, and I give teachings around it, and then I guide an inner journey specifically on that particular practice. The membership also includes other recordings that I post. We've got a great discussions page where we can share and ask questions of each other, and so on. So that's a great way for people to share, to have a deeper relationship with me and the work of Wild Wisdom. But at the very least, there's the free monthly practice that you can sign up for. And then, of course, there's my live work, which I'll be kicking off again later this year, pilgrimages in West Island and in here where I live in Australia.
Thank you, Michelle. For more information, podcasts, classes, and discounts on upcoming workshops, check out mystics-rising.com.